Widows Stories project raises awareness of the lives of war widows in the UK, past and present. For the last 3 years, we've been interviewing war widows about the challenges they've faced since losing their loved one to their service in the armed forces. But we wanted to find another, a more creative, a more impactful way in which these women could tell their stories to the world. And that's why today we're at the Queen's House in Greenwich, where for the first time ever we'll be unveiling the magnificent, the beautiful War Widows Quilt, made by over 90 war widows and their families.
The War Widows Quilt project has been amazingly important to the War Widows Association to be involved in a project like this. When we first launched the War Widows Stories project with Dr. Muller, it was interesting. It was something I was passionate about because stories, or the stories of war widows, are often forgotten. War widows themselves are often forgotten. So to be part of this and to move the project forward was exciting. When Lois and Phil came along with the idea of a quilt, sewing a quilt, stitching a quilt, it was a different way to tell the story. And as the project developed over this past year, it has been amazing to be part of workshops where the ladies have stitched squares, and the stitching is somewhat secondary to actually in the workshops where the ladies opened up and talked, and I suppose it was sort of therapy and therapeutic in its own way. And to see the final quilt in situ in Queen's House is absolutely amazing. It's very poignant, and hopefully more people now, when they visit the quilt and see the quilt, will start to understand the war widow story.
I don't think I've ever felt such a responsibility to a project, actually, and to the people that I'm working with. The depth of emotion that people have poured into their artworks has been phenomenal. The pockets on the quilt, they contain fragments of their lives. They contain poems, they contain letters, photographs. For some women, actually physically sewing the date of the death was an incredibly powerful experience, and writing and sewing the name of their husband. For many women, the name of that husband has not been acknowledged on a memorial anywhere in the country. And a lot of people commented on this and the power of actually, and the importance of writing their husband's name on something that's going to be seen, that's going to be kept forever, a memorial. We also felt it incredibly important, though, that the women's names were on there. This is their story, it's a hidden story.
Lois and Phil and Nadine were just so, they were so supportive and encouraging, and they said it wasn't about how good the sewing was, the stitching was, it was about what went into it. And as I learned what the project was going to be, that it was going to really be telling our stories and a historical record, if you like, I was really then quite keen to become involved. To come here tonight and see the finished quilt has really been quite overwhelming and very emotional to see it all put together. It's the first time I've seen it all stitched together. It's a very, very powerful representation of a lot of tears, a lot of heartbreak, but a lot of happy memories as well. And I'm hugely, hugely proud to have been part of this project.
The War Widows Quilt is not only a piece of fabric that's been made by many people, that's been stitched by many people, it's also a poem that's been written by many authors, and it's been quite a thing to see people be so brave in making this work, because if you're going to make an artwork or if you're going to write a poem, you have to open your heart. That's the only way to do it. There is no shortcut. And what I hope is that the quilt will also speak to everybody else who walks into a room or sees a photograph of it, and because yes, it's talking about war, and it's talking about a part of history that is pushed to one side, and it's very, very important to talk about that. But also, it's speaking to all of us about the experience of loss.
I came along to this venue a year ago today because it was to be the first workshop where some of the widows would try their hand at sewing a square or writing a poem. And I decided to do our Christian names, my husband and my own, and the date of our wedding, because there's no way I want to record the date of his death, but I do want to remember the day we were married. So now that I see that on the quilt, I'm very pleased that I did do it, and that Lois did persuade me that even though I had misgivings, that I would be pleased with the outcome, and I am. It's very poignant today to see it as a finished article, and I think it really reflects exactly what we're trying to do as an association.